To understand what I'm about to tell you, you need to do something first. You need to pretend that I'm not just basically stealing the opening bit to Madvocat's video. Can you do that? Good. You see that depressed alcoholic? That's me. That too. There I am again. My name is Sheev Talks, and I am so fucking tired. I'm fucking tired. I'm cut the tape. Fuck this. I'm not doing this. So after 9 long, grueling years, The Flash has finally limped its way across the finish line, and I feel nothing right now after watching that finale. I'm not even angry or sad or bittersweet or anything like that. I have absolutely no emotions going through me at all. And considering how much this show used to mean to me, that's not something I ever wanted to say. I mean, the whole reason I started doing these videos to begin with is because I loved the show and wanted to see it return to form, and over time I realized that that was never gonna happen. Though I'll admit some of that could have to do with the fact that the show never really was all that good to begin with. I used to be of the belief that seasons 1 and 2 were well written and that there was a significant drop in quality by the 3rd season, but I've since been Madvo-pilled, and when I take a look back, I recognize that the writing was bad from the very start. One of the reasons why I like doing rewrite exercises is that it can really help put into perspective whether or not a thing ever actually was good. If I put myself in the writer's shoes and try to create a story in a used sandbox, what sorts of things will I have to account for, and is the story already inherently broken? I tried that with Flash Season 3 several years ago, and it didn't take much for me to realize that it didn't matter what I did, the show was already beyond saving. But one thing I will say about it, and I think this is the reason why so many still maintain the belief that this show used to be something special, is that I think the people working on the earlier seasons tried. They may not have done a good job, but I look back at Season 1 and compare it to Season 9 or 8 or 7 or any of the last 6 seasons, and there is very clearly some level of care that used to exist from the showrunners that's just gone now. And I'm not just talking about the writing. Look at the stark contrast between things like lighting and cinematography and the directing and camera work. I mean, honestly, just look at Zoom. Look at the actual care that was put into his costume back in Season 2. Dude was a fucking bird of prey, and look at him in Season 9. What the fuck happened? But yes, long story short, I recognize that the show was never good, and I just don't really care anymore. I apathetically sat through every episode of this season because I knew you guys would want me to talk about it, and so here I am. I mean, what am I supposed to say? Yeah, it was bad. Obviously, it was bad. I guess it's time for this year's Flash recap, because that's basically all these videos are at this point. You want to see how absurd it got this season? Well, strap in. Let's get this over with.
Where to start?
So I guess to start us off, there are a few changes this season. The first being that they changed the aspect ratio. Now it looks like this. There doesn't seem to have been a point to this change in the 9th and final season, but I guess they were going for a slightly cinematic look. I don't know. There's not really anything else to say about it. It just looks like that now. Deal with it. The other big change is that there were only 13 episodes as opposed to the usual 20-ish. I mean, from season 5 onward, the seasons kept on getting shorter, probably something to do with COVID, but since season 9 is far and away the shortest one, I saw a lot of people saying that we were in for a much tighter story. We weren't going to waste any time with filler or bad guy of the week episodes. This is the final season, so every episode is gonna count, which is not what we got, like at all. So now my issues with this season have far more to do with the fact that the writing is just all around bad, the acting is stilted, none of the characters have any chemistry anymore, and it's just overall goofy and cheesy and not in the endearing and charming way you might expect from a campy CW show. But if you ask any normie why this season was bad, they'll probably tell you it's because nothing happened for basically the entire season. Season 9 is separated into a couple different arcs. The first 5 episodes focus on the Red Death, who's been teased as a villain since season 5, and the last 4 are focused on Cobalt Blue, who again has been teased as an eventual Flash villain for years now. Pretty much since the beginning of the show, fans have been calling for this guy, with Rick Cosnett reprising his role as Eddie Thawne to don the suit, so I guess it was only right that they finally paid that off. But for any of you keeping count at home, that means that 9 out of those 13 episodes were part of their respective story arcs, which surely must mean that this season was tightly written and no time was wasted. So what could old Sheev mean when he says that nothing happens? Well, while it is true that on paper this season had all the workings of a concise and meaningful narrative, I look back and all I see is a jumbled and disjointed mess that lacks any direction or cohesion. This is the season that most felt like, yeah, things are just kinda happening, I guess. If you ask me, one of the bigger overarching problems is that they wasted too much time and they should have done away with the Red Red Death stuff entirely and focused on Cobalt Blue from the beginning. Because as it stands, the Red Death arc feels like an overly drawn-out nothing burger that could have been wrapped up in 1, maybe 2 episodes, and the Cobalt Blue stuff feels like an entire season of storytelling condensed into 4 episodes given no time to breathe. They should have picked one to focus on, and it should definitely have been that one. Because on paper, I don't entirely hate the idea of bringing Eddie back and having him slowly grow to resent Barry for basically stealing his life, because, I mean, yeah, that's basically what happened. It never exactly sat right with me that Eddie sacrificed his life to ensure a future for the guy who was giving his girlfriend "I want you" eyes the entire time they were together. But Eddie is also a good person who wouldn't just turn evil at the drop of a hat just because he's mad at Barry. So that's something that should definitely have taken a lot more time to develop than just 3 episodes. Honestly, he should have been brought back at some point last season at the very latest, and they could have dropped hints that he was starting to become jealous of the life Barry was given with Iris that would never get to be his, and then have him snap at the very end, setting him up to be the villain before this season even began. It feels like we had a lot of ground to cover, and we wasted it on an episode where Becky Sharp's luck powers stopped working.
Oh, that stings.
Why did we need this? And of course, they couldn't just let Eddie be the villain all by himself. Since this was the series finale, they decided to pull out all the stops by bringing back all the major speedster villains from throughout the show, which, I mean, was about as lame as you'd expect for a number of reasons. Like, again, we really wasted time this entire season on nothing, only to rush Eddie's character development and then bring back all these other past villains for like half an episode before defeating them again. What was even the point of that? They barely fucking did anything. It's not really helped by the fact that all of them were beaten by regular non-speedster members of Team Flash and not, you know, by the Flash in the finale of The Flash. Like, I wasn't happy that they brought Thawne back for the gazillionth time, because I think you all know how tired I am of seeing him, but I think it aggravated me even more that Barry wasn't the one to defeat him. He got fucking taken out by Allegra. The fucking main antagonist of this series who keeps coming back and tormenting Barry gets one last hurrah, and he's fucking beaten by Allegra. Okay. It was really fun watching Nora kill Savitar like it was no big deal, as if he wasn't the main villain for an entire season, who was apparently super difficult to beat because of how fast and powerful he is. And I guess we're not gonna have Nora reflect on the fact that she just killed her own father, because, again, these guys were only around for half an episode, so there wasn't time to do anything meaningful with any of them. And wait a minute, did Nora just kill? I thought there was like a whole rule that Team Flash lived by about not killing, or... Fuck me, who cares? Oh, and I think the one that was the most insulting was Godspeed getting taken down by fucking Cecile. Not because I especially liked his character, because I really don't, but because he's supposed to be the most powerful villain out of all of them. He was running circles around Thawne, remember? And he has the ability to manifest clones at will and infect the literal cosmic entity that gives Barry his powers, and he gets beaten by Cecile? And also, she can fly now, like... She just started doing that in the finale, but that was never once set up, so...
They fly now? They fly now!
The scene where all the villains are brought back and they meet each other is so funny, because the acting is the typical hammy and over-the-top bad guy acting that you come to expect from these characters, and the dialogue is just hilariously bad. Like, it feels like it was written by one of those Reddit what-if posts about, like, what if this character met this character? I bet Godspeed would say, "I am the god of speed," and then Savitar would retort, "No, I am.
I'm the one true god of speed."
No, I am.
But anyway, like I already said, they all get defeated like halfway through the episode, and they're taken down by the Team Flash D-listers. The only villain that's actually fought by Barry is Eddie, and he literally defeats him through the power of talking it out, which has become a meme on this show, so I guess it's no surprise that it happened here. The final villain of the show, the one to cap off the series in its grand finale, changes his mind at the 11th hour and just decides to be good again, which might have even been compelling if his development into a villain wasn't rushed to begin with. And I'm sorry, I thought the negative Speed Force avatar had to hate Barry. Wasn't that one of the parameters?
You're the new avatar? That's impossible. Joe doesn't hate me.
Doesn't the fact that he and Eddie are cool kinda mean the negative Speed Force wouldn't want him as an avatar anymore? Can it leave him, or is it just stuck with him now? The rules of this thing are very ill-defined, so I guess there's really no way of knowing what it can and can't do. For instance, you might be arguing that the negative Speed Force possessing Joe in 2000 would fuck with the timeline significantly, since surely Joe would remember all that and therefore wouldn't be surprised when Barry grows up and becomes the Flash. So then you might have to infer that he doesn't retain any memory from when he was possessed, but that can't be true, because in the next episode it possessed Mark, and after the fact he remembered everything and even reflected on what he was thinking while under its control.
Mark, you were possessed by the crystal. Did that offer any insight?
While I was trapped inside, all I could think about was how much I love that guy.
What was the point of this scene where Eddie gets struck by lightning? It didn't give him speedster powers, and obviously this isn't when he was resurrected because, you know, he was already alive. This scene literally only existed to draw a parallel to Barry getting his powers, but it didn't end up meaning anything beyond that. You could argue that this scene also served the purpose of starting Eddie down the path of figuring out who he really is, but that had nothing to do with him being struck by lightning. He found a file that was teleported into his lab, which could have happened regardless. And I'm pretty annoyed at the fact that the negative speed force can just resurrect people, by the way. Like, this is basically not even addressed, but it brought back Eddie, and its power was the reason that all the rest of the speedsters were able to come back, so I guess it's just powerful enough to raise the dead. I only ask because theoretically isn't it supposed to have the exact same power level as the Speed Force? Does that mean that the Speed Force can also resurrect the dead? Because I know a few characters who might want to ask it about that, and I'm not saying that it should because, like, natural order or whatever, but that still doesn't mean that some of the characters wouldn't be asking at the very least. It's only natural to raise that question when you meet a literal god and find out that it has the power to bring people back from the dead, but I guess none of the characters were thinking about it, so lucky for the Speed Force that they're all idiots, otherwise it would have to start answering some pretty difficult questions. Still though, it's a little fucked up to wear the face of Barry's dead mother when you apparently have the ability to give her back to him and you won't. Believe it or not, actually, this isn't the only time this season that I've had to question the logistics of cosmic entities and their capabilities, because they brought back Oliver for one last Arrow circle jerk, and he pulled some pretty ridiculous shit. For those who need a reminder, he basically became God at the end of Crisis and recreated the multiverse, and since then he's been chilling out in purgatory. But then Barry fucking dies, so Oliver has to bring him back to life and stop Dr. Suresh from sending his blood into a multiverse vortex, and no, really, I'm being serious, that happens. I kind of forgot about blood work because they haven't done anything with him in like 3 seasons, but then he showed up and I was like, oh, yeah, you're here. And yeah, his master plan was to get Wally to open a portal to the multiverse, like, the entire multiverse, I guess, I don't know, and then send his blood in there and spread it into every known reality, and it's up to our dashing heroes to stop him. This is really the plot of an episode, I'm not kidding. And they do this excuse where Oliver's powers are weaker while Ramsey is infecting the multiverse, so we can see him decked out in his supersuit shooting arrows at goons instead of, you know, being God and just stopping Ramsey immediately. But he enchants one of his arrows so that when it shoots into the portal it closes it while also getting rid of all the blood, and on top of that, curing Ramsey of his HLH, which was the entire reason he became a villain in the first place. That's just a thing that Oliver can do. He can cure disease. So, like, the best explanation I can say we're given is that Oliver says he can't intervene unless the multiverse is in danger, but says who? Aren't you the Spectre? Didn't you create the multiverse? Aren't you literally God? Or is there someone else above you making all these arbitrary rules? Will the balance of the fucking cosmos collapse if you step in and make the world a better place for every reality? Like, you created this world. Why would you not make it one without sickness or conflict or pain to begin with? And why aren't you doing anything about it now when you can cure all sickness? They could have explained it away a little better, but this scene still comes off as really bizarre because, again, none of the characters question the fact that Oliver can just do that. Not even Ramsey, who, again, is driven by a motivation to cure all diseases and eradicate death because he lost his mother to HLH. And Oliver takes away Ramsey's disease not to save him, but just so he can live longer while imprisoned, and this is framed as a heroic moment?
So it looks like you'll be spending the rest of your human days as a regular criminal.
We're gonna rot until old age, just like everyone else.
I was gonna cure death. I was supposed to save the world.
Don't worry. It's our job.
Like, what the fuck? You can't even write it off like he had no control over how the new multiverse would be, because he brought back people in his life that he cared about and even made it so that the crime rate in his own city was completely eradicated.
Ever since the crisis, crime in Star City disappeared overnight.
So why couldn't he have made things to where there was no conflict or disease or anything bad? I mean, obviously the meta reason would be because then none of the Arrowverse shows would have had anything going on, but if you want to continue generating conflict in your shows, maybe don't make your main character friends with God?
I just don't understand.
If Ollie could fix everything, then why couldn't he fix this?
I think that Oliver could only change the things that didn't change him.
You used your powers to bring back everyone you loved.
Not everyone. Your dad. Bringing him back would have done too much to alter reality.
Oh, okay, then I guess his mother's death didn't change him? Or Tommy's? Isn't that the entire reason he stopped killing people? Did the existence of crime in his city also not affect his decision-making at any point in the show? Because I'm pretty sure it did. What a lame-ass excuse. Fuck the Arrowverse. May it burn in hell. Good riddance. But that's enough about Oliver, because after all, this isn't his show. And besides, I don't think anyone on Team Flash would care if Oliver could bring back any of their loved ones, considering the way they didn't even mourn Caitlyn's death. Oh yeah, Caitlyn died. That happened. So, like, remember how I mentioned that Frost finally died last season? Well, Caitlyn and Fuckface spent the entire rest of the season trying to resurrect her by building a machine that, I guess, was meant to reactivate that part of Caitlyn's brain from which Frost originated. Only that ended up failing, and as a result it transformed her into this new entity entirely with no prior memories, making it so that Caitlyn was, for all intents and purposes, dead. And nobody on Team Flash really seemed to take that as seriously as you'd think. Like, obviously they're upset when they first find out, in the moment, and throughout that episode they try to bring her back, only to realize that by doing so they'd effectively be killing Keone. Her name is Keone, by the way. And so they decide to give her the choice, and as a result she ends up sticking around and Caitlyn is gone for good. I mean, she does come back in the finale because no one's ever really gone, but as far as Team Flash are aware, she's gone and they're never gonna see her again. So what do? They go clubbing. No, I'm not kidding. The same exact episode ends with all of them going out to a club and partying. There isn't some kind of funeral for their friend who's been here since day one. They don't really seem all that broken up about it. Cisco is told about it off screen because Carlos Valdez didn't want to come back. He's not in this season at all, not even the finale. But we know that he's met Keone because he's over at Argus, and she mentions later on that Argus has been helping her discover her powers.
Argus has been helping me catalog my new powers.
So not only did none of the team really give a shit that Caitlyn died, but we didn't even get to see Cisco's reaction. Fuck this show. There's an episode later on this season where Barry starts feeling survivor's guilt because thanks to some mishaps that happened last season, he ended up gaining a few extra years of youth. So now instead of being like 34, he's celebrating his 30th birthday, and it's making him reflect on all the people who have died for him while he basically gets a second lease on life. And in concept, that would be a really great arc for Barry, but it rings pretty hollow when in the same exact season, he didn't give all that much of a fuck about the death of one of his oldest friends.
I really missed you. We all did.
Liar!
I reiterate, fuck this show. I mean, what do you want me to say? Sorry if it seems like I'm phoning it in with this review, but you all already know it's bad. I could sit here and nitpick every single episode, thoroughly break down every scene and explain why it's broken on all levels, but the passion just isn't there anymore. I really don't care about this show, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. So let me get one more thing off my chest with this season and we'll call it quits. At the beginning of the final arc on this show, Barry gets teleported back in time to the day his mother died and is unable to return because I guess the negative speed force won't let him. So instead he ends up spending the day with his parents and getting that closure that he always needed, which it feels like he's gotten at least 100 times by this point, but whatever. And then, after 9 years, we finally get that fateful moment that a lot of fans have been clamoring to see since season 1. We got to see Barry chase Thawne to his parents' house and tell his past self not to intervene in order to preserve the timeline, fully rounding out his series arc of accepting his mom's death and bringing everything full circle. Which would be great if, you know, that made any sense. So, like, I know at this point it's silly to ask this show to maintain consistent time travel rules because they never really even made sense to begin with, but after watching this episode, I was really confused because I'm pretty sure that's not how it's supposed to work. And after giving it more thought over the last few weeks and rewatching the episode for this review, I'm pretty certain that this just doesn't work at all. And in fact, like I said, I know fans have been asking for this ever since the finale of season 1, but even back then, I remember thinking that didn't make any sense because that version of Barry was never the one we were following throughout this series. Thawne came from a version of the timeline where Barry's parents never died.
Because I hate you. Not you now. You years from now.
In the future.
In a future, yes.
He came back to 2000 to kill Barry as a child, but when future Barry got him to safety, he settled for the next best thing by killing his mother, which was never the plan and isn't what originally happens. In the timeline Thawne is from, the real Harrison Wells creates Star Labs and sets off the particle accelerator, thus creating the Flash, but that doesn't happen until 2020. Thawne then takes his place and accelerates that to happen in 2013 in order to get back to his time period sooner.
In the year 2020, you and your
wife successfully launched a particle accelerator that changed the course of history. I need it to happen a bit sooner if I'm going to get back.
Which means that the version of Barry that chases Thawne into his childhood home is the one who became the Flash in 2020, not 2014. This is even reinforced by the fact that when Thawne first meets Barry's daughter, he refers to her as Dawn, implying that original Barry named his daughter that and Nora never existed.
It's, Dawn, if I'm not mistaken.
Nora.
Nora.
And it makes sense that in the original timeline he wouldn't name his child after his mom, because she might very well have still been alive by the time Dawn was born. All that is to say, this version of Barry is not our Barry. Now, you might argue that Thawne killing Nora should erase Barry from the timeline, and that is technically true, but it doesn't, nor does it erase Thawne, which is also what would happen if the rules of time travel made any sense in this goddamn show. Ergo, we have to infer that because it would otherwise create a paradox, OG Barry and Thawne have to exist in that moment, and Nora has to die. Either way, the time travel rules are horrid, and that's really nothing new for this show, but that's also kind of my point. Year after year, I feel like I'm saying the exact same thing over and over again, and I'm done talking about this show. I know I said earlier that I no longer consider the first 2 seasons good, but I do still like them, and the scene in the finale of season 1, where Barry goes back in time to save his mom but ends up letting her die, getting to say goodbye to her in her dying moment, still gets me in my feels every single time I watch it. So the fact that we revisited that night from the older Barry's POV should have meant something, and yet I felt absolutely nothing. I no longer care about any of these characters, and honestly, I don't think anyone working on this show does either, so it's really hard to feel anything toward this final season. I can't even muster up anger, because when I watched the finale, it just left me feeling empty inside. So I'm ending the video here, and I can't say I'll ever watch or think about this show ever again, nor do I plan to watch the Flash movie coming out in a couple weeks, so don't be expecting a video on it. On a brighter note, I'm still absolutely loving Superman and Lois. We're 3 seasons in now, and it's managed to continue being genuinely great. If you're looking for actual good DC TV, I definitely recommend it. It's way better written, shot, acted, and you actually get a sense that the people behind it give a shit about what they're making. Without getting into spoilers, this season is doing an incredibly interesting and compelling storyline that I've never seen done in any Superman story, and it's an absolute tearjerker. Plus, if you're not already sold, I'd also like to mention that it doesn't take place in the same universe as the rest of these shows. It's technically part of the same multiverse, but it's not connected to them any more than shows like Doom Patrol or Stargirl are, so I think it's safe to say that the Arrowverse can't do too much damage, especially now that it's officially over. So go watch that, it's absolutely fantastic. Figured it was worth mentioning here because I'm not going to have time to do a video on the show anytime soon. It's going to be a busy summer. So with all that said, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to catch you all again real soon. Ciao!